Give us a place to stand and a place to grow. We'll put up a spa costing billions in dough. Yes, there are big changes coming to Ontario Place. Meet the filmmaker behind the new Ontario Place documentary. That's next on Brio TV, the podcast. Well, hi, everybody. My name is Bill Brio, and in this episode, I speak with Ali Weinstein. She's the filmmaker behind Your Tomorrow, a 90-minute documentary premiering March 23rd on TVO, and which starts streaming March 21 at TVO Docs. It can also be seen on YouTube channels, as well as the Smart TV app. Now, this film is all about the fate of Ontario Place, which was a place I was very familiar with. I worked there as a teenager. It was a very cool place to have a summer job. $2 an hour and all the French fries you could eat. As a young teen, I was a busboy at the Blockhouse restaurant on the West Island, and it faced east. So for 3 summers, I could walk out the front of the restaurant and look at the CN Tower as it was being built, rising above the Toronto skyline. Over the past 50 years, a lot of Torontonians landed their first summer jobs at this lakefront tourist attraction. My cousin Mike Brio worked the paddle boats that floated under the pavilions. My high school pals Dave and Pat and about 15 or 30 other Bullocks and even Jimmy Lasher, we all worked there. So, Ontario Place was pretty amazing. Originally opened in 1971 as a utopian vision of accessibility. It was built as a getaway for families unable to afford cottages. Over the decades, it grew into a vibrant 155-acre waterfront sanctuary, defined by its striking modernist architecture and car-free landscape, until its future was suddenly up for sale. Now, as bulldozers take over, Your Tomorrow captures the final moments of an era, offering an elegy to the spaces that define us. The vision for this doc, which was a hit last fall at TIFF, is writer, director, producer Ali Weinstein, and she's with me right now. Start off just by saying how much I enjoyed the documentary.
Thank you.
And it's very personal for me. I worked as a busboy at the Blockhouse restaurant on the West Island for 3 summers, 72, 73, 74. When I was 15, 16, and 17. So I watched the CN Tower go up from that restaurant. It was at the end of the island. It looked east, and every summer it would be higher. I saw the crane put the top on and everything. And
that's so cool. So
I had the experience of there almost from the very first summer. I think it opened in 71, right?
Yeah, that's right.
So it was very moving for me to watch Your Tomorrow, which we'll just mention is premiering on March 23rd on TVO and streaming on the digital TVO docs starting March 21st. You can also see it across Canada on YouTube channel and Smart TV app. Right? So a lot of people will have a chance to see what was quite a sensation and for you at TIFF last year, right?
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it was fun to premiere the film at TIFF. I've never had a film at TIFF before, and so it was a lot of fun.
I bet it was.
Fiction films,
Yeah. No, it was very, very interesting. So I jumped at the chance to speak with you. Congrats. And I know you're from a documentary family. Your father, right. Larry Weinstein, has made several great docs over the last many, many years.
Yes.
And I've enjoyed some of his as well. But let's get right down to Your Tomorrow. And okay. This is a fascinating, really, on so many levels. But it's kind of the story of, a theme park. I think, in the notes for the film, it was built in 71 as a place for families to go to. A lot of Ontarians who maybe couldn't afford cottages, things like that. And over the decades, it was this wonderful sanctuary with this great architecture, I think probably inspired by Expo and World's Fairs. And then suddenly it was up for sale. So we're at a point now in March of 2025 where I guess they're getting things ready, building a spa and other areas there, that it's all, as your documentary shows, it's all fenced off.
Yeah.
It looks like a jail. There's bars everywhere toward the end. Right. Very disturbing. And so you're at the right place at the right time with this, right? And it's really kind of a political film.
It is. And I actually didn't really want it to be as political as it is. Honestly, when I was starting to film, like my original intention was to make it a bit more of a love letter to Ontario Place, and specifically Ontario Place in this like sort of limbo period. I was thinking of it as after its heyday, like the time that you worked there. And my parents have memories. My dad, who you mentioned, also worked there as an usher at the Cinesphere. And so many people have really strong formative memories at Ontario Place. So after its heyday, before it gets redeveloped into this for-profit, big foreign-owned venture, I was spending a lot of time at Ontario Place during the pandemic, just by chance. Like I kind of wandered there one day and was like, oh my God, like it's sort of become this public park, and there's no programming the way that there used to be. Yeah. There's no active log ride and stuff like that anymore, but it's like this wilderness that you can see the water, there's beaches, there's forested areas, there's like, you can still kind of walk underneath all that beautiful futuristic architecture of the pods and the Cinesphere. And I just spent so much time there during the pandemic, and I wanted to capture that moment in time and the magic and the beauty of this space as it was now when people were using it as a public park. And really, that's all I wanted to show. I didn't want to make a redevelopment film. And then as it happened, like it just takes a very long time to get funding for documentaries often. And so I sort of started to shoot. And then it took long enough to kind of get all my ducks in a row that a crane came in to start, like construction started, and there was more activism. Some of the people I started shooting with, like a bird watcher and a swimmer, they became activists kind of working against the spa coming there. So all of a sudden I had this film that was becoming a little bit more political. And in the end, I think the film is actually stronger for it, that there's sort of through line of like this threat to the space, which was always there, but I wasn't intending on including that as much as I did in the end.
Well, every film needs a good villain, and
that's true.
I think that's sort of how it worked out. Now, but I'm very much in sympathy with the original plan. Even I remember when I was there, the trees were young. They weren't. It was fairly new, but they were still enough trees and things. And it was even then at the beginning a bird sanctuary. There was all kinds of birds on the ground those early years. I mean, obviously everybody remembers the Canadian geese. They were like tourists,
everywhere.
Everywhere, and quite aggressive, but all kinds of other wildlife too. So it's beautiful to see that what you captured in its decline as a tourist attraction was still a lovely and interesting nature park. And that's a fun part of it. I don't know how many, do you actually have a number of how many species of birds actually live there or use it, or?
That's a good question. So one of the people in the film, Francesca, who's a really avid bird watcher, she told me about ebird.com, where birders will log their sightings. Yeah. And so it would change. Like I think when I first started researching the film, it was like 160 something different types of bird species just at Ontario Place.
Incredible.
And by the end of shooting, it was like up to 190 something. I'm pulling up ebird.com right now so I can take a look, but
that's awesome.
I don't know. It might take me a second.
Well, that's pretty good ballpark. It has all those little nooks and crannies, even at that point. There's a point in the film when some of the birders who are there mentioned, or just the people who are planting and trying to preserve the nature, that there was 850 trees at risk.
Yes.
Do you know if they were in fact chopped down, or part of them, or what the count?
I'm really sad to report that they were chopped down.
Wow.
So,
Wow.
yeah, like Ontario Place is, an interesting landmass, like kind of complicated, made out of landfill. And there's multiple different areas, including Trillium Park in the east. And then there's like a middle section, and then West Island, where the spa is supposed to be built. West Island is where there were, everything there was at risk of being torn down. And there's 850 mature trees that were there. And so the film premiered at TIFF in September. And then just a few weeks later, in October of this past year, all the trees were chopped down. All the buildings over there were razed to make way for the spa.
It's real.
Which was super sad. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there was no effort made to build around them even, it was really ridiculous. For a half a century of growth,
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, terrible. Back in a moment with documentary filmmaker Ali Weinstein.
Decider calls it a pulse-pounding restaurant drama that's a British cousin of The Bear. And Rotten Tomatoes, which they do not cook with in this show, says it's a culinary drama with palpable tension simmering beneath the surface. They're talking about Boiling Point, a 5-part BBC Studios production based on the BAFTA award-winning film of the same name. Set in London, Vinette Robinson stars as the head chef leading a new crew in one of the city's latest big-money, high-pressure restaurants. Compelling, intense, and very complicated. That's Boiling Point, premiering exclusively in Canada March 13th on Super Channel Fuse.
And we're back with Ali Weinstein. There's not only, we talk about it being a political film. It is kind of ironic that the Premier of Ontario is fighting now on behalf of Canada, fighting against another government and oligarchs who are overreaching for land. And now he's representing us in a similar situation, only the reverse of what he was doing. So it does give your film added poignancy and relevance right now. But
yeah, it's super fascinating what's happening.
It's incredible. There's some footage of Ford in the documentary, I guess at a press conference, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. But mostly it's people who are using the park. And you have, and I never thought of it when I was there as a beach area. It never dawned on me you could just sort of set up deck chairs and go swimming off the West Island. It seemed kind of stony and off limits. Yeah. But a lot of people were doing that in the later years, weren't they?
Yeah. I mean, that's interesting that when it was open in the early 70s that people didn't use it. Because I actually don't even know. I went to Ontario Place as a kid in the 90s, but I wouldn't have been there in the 70s. And I don't recall that beach either. I just recall my memories as a kid are like the water park and the log ride, both of which came in slightly after when you were there working.
There was no log ride when I was there, not at all.
But it's interesting because I guess like the way that, because Ontario Place was like, had all this active programming, these restaurants, the Children's Village, the Cinesphere, all this, so much, like all these exhibitions, right? In the pods. Later on, the silos in the West Island would have these educational exhibitions that were supposed to be like fun for kids. Yeah. I guess there was all that active programming. People were going there as a destination. And I think that during the pandemic, when there was no more programming and everything had just been left to kind of like rewild, I think people were just using it like a public park, and they were cycling, they were birding and they were walking. And I guess maybe it was during that time that people just started using the areas where it was easier to like throw a towel down. But yeah, the little like pebble beach there on the West Island that became really active as a beach during the pandemic. And because it's south facing and the water there is really clean as far as Lake Ontario goes,
Wow.
as far as access in Toronto goes. Yeah.
No
So
kidding.
it was nice. I would spend a lot of time on that beach during the pandemic.
Well, I mean, I remember my parents, I grew up in the West End in Etobicoke, and my dad had a 16-foot mahogany boat, lovely little old outboard, and we would put it in the Humber, and we would putter along to Ontario Place and literally pull into a dock.
Yeah.
And just visit. Like, it was the access was from the water as well.
Yeah.
But there were no log rides. The only thing, they had paddle boats around the Cinesphere under the pavilions, but there wasn't any thrill rides over at that end. You had to go to the east end to the Children's Village, which was an astounding place. Like, and free, I think. Like it was just it was all built on kids playing outside. Like, it just seems in 50 years the things that are different are staggering. But
I agree.
Like, this was it really was a utopian dream.
I agree. Yeah.
And I'm sorry to be taking up so much time just talking about me, but
no, I like it.
I would go to the Forum, which was the little majestic theater that was before the Budweiser theater, and it seated 3,000 in the circle and 5,000 on the hillsides.
Yeah,
I saw Chuck Berry, I saw Victor Borg, I saw the Oscar Peterson trio. I mean, Don McLean. It was astounding, and there was no place like that. And that, to me, when the Budweiser went up, that was a tragedy.
Totally.
So it's gone through a few changes, but certainly the access is so different. Did you just happen upon, now there's this Taiwanese Canadian retirees, the Changs. Did you know them about them before you started making this film, or did you just happen upon them when you were shooting?
No, I didn't know them. So they appear in the film a few times, and I kind of met people who are in the film in different ways. Like, there are a couple of people like Francesca the birdwatcher who I sort of met online before I met her in person, because she used to post all of her bird sightings on Twitter every single day. And I just sort of saw that she was posting a lot about Ontario Place, so I reached out to her. But there's plenty of people in the film who we just sort of ran into. Like, we were shooting a lot. We shot 93 days, which is a huge amount of time.
The whole summer.
Yeah. Well, and we shot sort of sporadically over the course of about a year and a half. So we were there in all kinds of weather. But one of our I would say like day 2 of shooting, we were just there, me and my cinematographer, Andrew, and we were like trying to get landscape shots and stuff. And then we just saw this really nice looking couple sitting on these 2 Muskoka chairs on a hill over the water. So we got a big wide shot where they're in it. And then we got a little closer to them and asked if we could film them. And it was only afterwards, like, we stopped shooting and we were just chatting with them, and they said, we come here every day after our morning coffee, and we never see the same view twice because the lake is always changing. And I thought that was so beautiful. And then we just kept seeing them. So the next time we saw them, we said, can we film you again? And this time, can we put a microphone on you? And please just talk to each other like you would if we weren't here. And so they did, and they spoke in Mandarin. And so it wasn't until the edit that we got it translated and realized that they were like golden, like Grace. Yes. She like waxes poetic. They speak about really profound things about what it's like to grow old and see your grandchildren grow up in the same sort of cut as then arguing about what kind of bird they're looking at together. And there's no cut. Like in the film, there's like no cut. They just go from talking about something profound to like the really mundane. And I just thought they were so incredible and natural on camera. So we just kept filming with them. And during the process of filming, we thought, okay, they come here every day. Maybe we could use them as a bit of a device in the film to kind of herald in each season. Yeah. It didn't quite work out so like chapter like as I expected it to, but they do come in, I think, 3 times in the film.
It does, and they are like a Greek chorus almost, dispensing wisdom. Very profound. It was very interesting. That was a great stroke of luck to run into them.
Oh, they're amazing. I'm glad you liked them.
Did they bring those chairs with them every time?
No, they're just there. They're supposed to go together at Ontario Place.
Somebody put 2 chairs there many years ago. That's hilarious. Now, the other guy who was the head of security, Sherman. Yeah, Sherman, who had been there 35 years or so, right? Did you just stumble over him as well?
He was someone I met early on in my research phase. Before I started even shooting, I went on a Facebook group called Ontario Place Former Summer Employees.
Oh, my goodness. I'm writing that down. Okay.
Yeah, you should join the group. I don't know how active Facebook, but it's cute. People just share their memories and stuff like that. Maybe there's people that you know on the Facebook group. But I don't know what because I always knew that I wanted the film to be very much like a snapshot in time. I didn't really want to do interviews talking about the past. I really wanted it to show this moment at Ontario Place. But I think I just wanted to like better educate myself about who loves Ontario Place, like who's and what's happening there. And I found this Facebook group and I did some pre-interviews with some people from that group. And it was in talking to someone in that group who they said, you should really talk to Sherman Lamb because he was working when we were working back there in the 80s. And he still works there and he would be interesting to talk to. So I had a really nice chat with him and saw how much he loved Ontario Place, how obviously important it's been for him in his life. Yeah. And I think I told him that, I would love to be able to shoot with some of the current staff at Ontario Place because they also are part of the makeup of that space. Yeah. If I'm shooting something about who uses the space now. And so he kind of put me in touch with the right people to get the permission to do that.
Well, it was smart because with the rest of the staff, this was a summer job mecca. It would be like if you lived in Anaheim, you at some point worked at Disneyland, and that's the same with Ontario Place. The people that went through that, I will check out that site. Holy smokes. But I think it was very relevant to hear from them, the younger people who were there that summer and the experiences they were having and just see them out on the Lakeshore Boulevard directing traffic and everything like that. So that was kind of brilliant. Even when I worked at the restaurants at Ontario Place, I was a busboy, and Elaine Loring, who used to be on Global News, was one of the waitresses. That I was clearing tables, and there was folks there. And just you would go to clear tables and there'd be some of the Toronto Argonauts there or Coach Leo Cahill or, the regulars were people who were involved in that community on all kinds of levels. So it's a lot of connections and it's really fun to see it even in decline. Yeah. And I'm wondering, were you, obviously you're a documentarian, you must watch a lot of documentaries, Ali. Did you ever see, what's that? There's a documentary about the theme park in New Jersey that was Class Action Park.
I haven't actually.
Look that up because it came out a few years ago, and it was about a theme park in, I think, New Jersey that was a fun place to go in the 70s and 80s, but was kind of deadly. It was unregulated. People were going through tubes, like sewage tubes, and landing 40 feet into the water. Like, it was dangerous. People died. Like, it was very ridiculous. But it was also a place that was sort of recorded in decline, or there was some documentaries made advice about malls that remember there was a guy roller skating through the dead malls in America. There was a little bit of that.
I have a friend making a documentary right now about a mall that's dying. Like it's a very I've seen lots of work on that topic, specifically malls, and I think it's interesting because like everyone can kind of relate to that because we all in every city and town in North America we have that type of experience of malls that used to be a real community center in a way, and they've fallen into decline. And
they're everywhere. They're in anybody who's lived any city in North America has had that experience. But even I don't know if it was the documentary you worked on or produced about Honest Ed's. Was that your? I produced it. Yeah. So again, that was a touchstone for Canadians, a place that everybody, when you finally moved out and had your own place, you went there for knives and forks, right? Or whatever. So it's quite touching to a lot of people. And Ontario Place, you explode that experience into millions of people. It really resonates, right? Yeah. Ali will be back after this short message. Well, it's no surprise that Paramount Plus has remained one of the fastest growing streaming services. It just shows you what being a sponsor here at Brio TV can do for a brand. Besides all the great originals you can stream anytime, such as Landman with Billy Bob or Mayor of Kingstown, here's what's new this month. Dennis Quaid stars as a once-beloved father turned serial killer in the inspired by a true story original, Happy Face. Later in March, Guy Ritchie's new organized crime drama, Mobland, premieres starring Tom Hardy, Pierce Brosnan, and Helen Mirren. Want more peace and love in your programming? Paramount presents Ringo and Friends at the Ryman, a 2-hour celebration of the ex-Beatle at Nashville's Country Music Temple. Sheryl Crow, Emmylou Harris, and Jack White are among the friends. Another rocker is showcased in the newly remastered doc, Tom Petty, Heartbreakers Beach Party. Finally, in celebration of Women's History Month, check out Women Move Mountains, Paramount's salute to the women who inspire us. And remember, there's a mountain of entertainment every month on Paramount Plus. Time once again to speak with Emily Gagne at Hollywood Suite. Emily, this is a big month. What do you got for us now?
Well, as you may or may not know, March 8th is International Women's Day, and we are celebrating all month long with movies made by women in film. So that means women in front of the camera, behind the camera, but I'm really excited about the movies that are directed by women that we have, like Dance Girl Dance, Daisy's Real Genius, The Watermelon Woman, The Matrix, American Psycho. We've got so many options for you to explore this month.
I hear you got you get an Oscar tie-in, I believe, right?
We do. We have The Black Box Diaries, which is a documentary made by a journalist about her sexual abuse case, and it is nominated for Best Feature Documentary at the Oscars this year, so you don't want to miss it.
All right, that's exciting news. What about anything that's, more from the mid-century, say?
Oh, we've got something special. It's the 75th anniversary of All About Eve, and we've got it on demand in March.
Well, fasten your seatbelts. It's going to be a bumpy ride all month long on Hollywood Suite. Emily, thanks again.
Thanks, Bill.
And we're back. Now, do you know whether the Cinesphere, will that be still operational once the dust is settled and the spa is open? Are they going to preserve that?
Yeah, that's the idea. So I think we can actually thank Ontario Place for All, which is the grassroots organization that worked to try to protect Ontario Place at different points in time. Like, they became very active recently trying to stop the spa, and they wanted to keep Ontario Place public. But prior to that, like they've been active for quite a while. Before these particular plans were announced, it was known that the government was going to redevelop Ontario Place. It's just like what it would become, we didn't know. And there was lots of speculation of like, was Doug Ford gonna try to make it a casino or like a Ferris wheel or condos or who knows?
Right.
And so Ontario Place for All worked to try to designate the Cinesphere and the pods, the glass structures next to the Cinesphere, as heritage buildings, so they can't be touched, which they absolutely deserve to be. I mean, it's really incredible architecture, very unique in the world. Designed by Eberhard Zeidler, and it's this modernist mega structure. It's like sort of like a movement of architecture in the late 60s. So those will not be touched. There's lots of critics who say that just by building a massive indoor space, the spa directly next to the Cinesphere, that's going to kind of tower over it, like that changes the experience of the architecture already. Without physically touching the Cinesphere, you're messing with it, in
Right.
terms of the human experience of witnessing the beauty of the space. But right now, it's not going to be touched. And I think the idea is that when everything opens again, they will still show movies at the Cinesphere, which is great. I just think we should all remain vigilant if we care about the Cinesphere, because
Absolutely.
there's lots that this government likes to do that's sort of at their whim, at their whims.
Well, yeah. And I mean, it will end up looking like the box that Cinesphere came in, probably.
Yeah.
But as long as Cinesphere is there, and as you mentioned, your dad being an usher there, how many other filmmakers were inspired just by going there? And, that's giant 6-story screen, all those 80, 90 speakers. I remember seeing
incredible cinema. Sorry.
What was the North of Superior was the movie I probably saw 50 times.
Yeah.
And just you got motion sickness sitting there as it lurched around it, but it was breathtaking and very inspiring. And I went to a screening there 5-6 years ago with the filmmaker for that film, who passed away since then. And sadly, I can't remember his name, but it was pretty cool to talk to him later about the making of that. Just basically clearing the treetops with the airplane when they were flying.
Graham Ferguson? Are you talking about the North of Superior?
Yes. He, what a breathtaking film he made, and many others. So very cool.
Well, Ontario Place, one of the staff at Ontario Place would proudly mention to me a few times that the Cinesphere is Christopher Nolan's favorite cinema.
Wow, very nice. Cool.
I mean, I don't know if that's totally true, but I do know that because there was a period where like TIFF had some screenings during the festival at the Cinesphere. And I think that Christopher Nolan must have gone to a screening of one of his films there. And so he's definitely quoted in some interviews about like how amazing that theater is. So it's an incredible, incredible theater. Mm-hmm.
It is pretty cool. And now I just was wondering about the whole the World's Fair aspect of it too. That's just the film is very much of its time, isn't it? Or it records a place that maybe time has passed. There aren't really World Fairs like Expo anymore to that extent. There's any part of you that thinks, well, maybe this renovation, maybe what they're doing is a positive thing. Maybe there was a need for a renovation and a new use for this area.
I think there was a need for a renovation, absolutely, because as much as I loved the wild version of Ontario Place, like I actually really liked kind of that feeling of urban exploration that you got if you kind of just wandered into the old log ride that had just sat there untouched and was overgrown with like weeds and stuff. It just felt very like otherworldly and just really magical to walk through that. But it is, theoretically maybe dangerous, like maybe it was going to fall apart. And also like it's such a prime piece of real estate. Like it would be nice if it was treated with respect and that people really had access to enjoy that piece of land. In my view, I think that the best use of the space would have been to give the West Island a similar treatment to what Trillium Park got in 2017. There was a redevelopment of the eastern part of Ontario Place, Trillium Park, and all they did was just clean it up, plant a bunch of new plants, all native to Ontario. Like, it still had that original spirit of Ontario Place where it's like, let's keep this a Ontario prideful spot where we can like learn about Ontario. And there's lots of permanent art there and also temporary art exhibitions in that space, all of it totally free and open to the public. And I wish that that same treatment had been given to the rest of Ontario Place. And, you know, sometimes you get like critics saying, well, they have to make money somehow. Like, you know, Ontario Place was never free when it was like open, but in the early days, it was incredibly affordable. And the price of admission got you into the Cinesphere to see these amazing movies. It got you access to concerts at the Forum, and you saw, as you said, like Chuck Berry, like the world's most important bands and singers,
amazing,
all for the same price of admission. Like, it was very, very, very affordable. And, you know, I think that people's needs change as well. And Toronto is a very different city than it was in 1971. And we have like this influx of massive condos. There's Liberty Village next to Ontario Places. People live inside and they don't have backyards. And Ontario Place was their literal backyard. And so I think just sort of making Ontario Place the beautiful public park that it was, and just kind of like polishing it and making it safe and exciting, I think it could have been a really great tourist attraction as a public park, you know? That's my 2 cents.
I agree. And a lot of it, you know, is very practical. They sunk 3 tankers and made the breakwater that goes out there, put some concrete over it, and it was just a good place to walk. You know, like,
totally.
Didn't have to be a log flume to be
exactly. Pretty cool. And I saw people, like, in my time filming there, I just saw so many incredible uses of that space. My camera wasn't always rolling, and I can't tell you how many times I was like, oh my God, so mad that I wasn't shooting. Like, I saw unicyclers going down that breakwater. Like, now that you're talking about this specific area, I'm just envisioning there were weekends in the summer where I would just see it like packed with families and really diverse. Like, I think very much in like the spirit of how, like, you know, when it was first open, it was, as you said, like kind of meant to be this place where if you didn't have a cottage, you could come have access to the lake. And I think, like, I don't know, I still saw that happening like before it got shut down for redevelopment. And I don't think it's going to be the same. I don't think enclosing that whole area in a building is the right move at all. And I certainly don't think that leasing it for 100 years to like a foreign owned business is the right way to go. I love the fact that that place was a place to kind of learn about Canadian and Ontario history. And it is ironic talking about Doug Ford right now. I mean, in this moment of Canadian pride, which like I don't think I've experienced in my lifetime, honestly. It's like, wouldn't it be so cool, the original vision of Ontario Place, if we could bring that to life again right now? And you're
right. It's an opportunity missed. Even in the film, as you mentioned, you don't use very much archival vintage footage, but there's a few nuggets in there, and some of it is of the Ontario Place anthem, and it's chilling to hear it sung because literally the lyrics are, you know, not just a place to grow, but this is our place, Ontario Place. It's not anymore, kind of. And so something was lost in the translation. Did you screen a lot of that archival to sort of arrive at the clips that you wanted?
Yes and no. Yes, the answer is yes. But we were lucky enough to get a lot of that archive from the Archives of Ontario, which is fantastic. Nice. They have a really robust archive. They're also, I mean, they're run by the government. They're understaffed. It was a bit challenging because a lot of the archive is not digitized, but it's described online. So we would go through and make requests. And originally they said, okay, it'll take 14 days to digitize it. Like, we made requests in February and didn't have access to even view a lot of it until like July. So it was challenging because the amount of time we spent just like trying to get them on the phone to be like, we actually need this and we have a deadline, you know?
Well, but that's really fast moving, really. I mean, that's pretty quick.
February to July.
Well, you know, like it's trickier, and if you to get it done right, you know, yours, it looks like good, decent wet gate transfers, right? Of 16 millimeter or whatever it was.
That's true. I know I shouldn't give them such a hard time. I mean, they came through in the end, and it was really and truly the final hour. Like, there was some stuff that we got the very last week of our edit before we picture locked, including that footage of Bill Davis giving that speech saying
cool.
that.
Yeah.
And I didn't know that existed. Like, they didn't, the detail in which it was written up in the archives, like, I didn't know Bill Davis was giving that speech, or what he was saying at least. And so we got that in our final week, and we're like, okay, well, we have to include this because it kind of just shows the contrast between the original intention of this space to what it's become. And so, yeah.
Well chosen. Bill Davis was the premier of Ontario back before even Ontario Place was built, of course.
And a conservative premier, actually, interestingly.
Yes, he was. Absolutely. Yeah. Brampton Bill. Now, next time, Ali, you're stuck for film. I collect 16 millimeter film. I have a basement full of it, and I have about 5 or 6 Ontario Place films over the years. Had I only known, some of that stuff fades, but you can get
What era is it from?
I have stuff from the 70s, mid 70s. I've got like a Scottish tattoo at the CNE, and then the air shows at Ontario Place and things like that.
Cool.
Yeah, sort of fascinating. But so I was happy to see that you used some of that, but I think it was wise to set it in today and theme it that way.
Yeah.
Now, do you know, what's next? You must be probably planning another project or documentary. Is it too early to ask or to tell about it, or?
You would think so. I don't quite know. Like, honestly, I don't know what's next. It's not even that I'm trying to keep my cards close to my chest. I have some ideas, but I feel like there's such early gestation stages that I don't even know if I want to commit to these ideas yet. Also, like, this film, it's the first time I've ever filmed anything observationally. Like, normally I base my films a lot in interview, and then from there I might shoot some verite scenes or B-roll or what have you. But this film was like strictly just going and shooting what we were seeing. And because I was so new to it, I feel like I was just like really chasing and trying to make sure that I was there all the time in case something interesting happened. And so the amount of time I spent at Ontario Place shooting, and then we had so much footage that the edit was like very intense to go through all that footage. So I feel like I'm still recovering from like the amount of work that this film.
Absolutely.
I think I want to make another observational film again in the future, but I think I need to I think my next film needs to take a different approach just to give myself a bit of like a creative break from that type of filmmaking. We can check back in. I'm not sure what's next for me.
All right. I definitely will. But congrats on this film, Your Tomorrow. And definitely there seems like lots of potential. Would you say making this film then has changed you as a filmmaker? You said it's more observational. You'll probably retain some lessons from making this one on other projects.
Absolutely. I mean, I definitely learned a few lessons along the way. I mean, one thing it's a really tough one actually, because I'm, documentary filmmakers, even though we're filming reality, so much of, there's so much that we have to just ask people to, can you do that again? Because we didn't really capture that properly or whatever. And it was a tough lesson, but on this one, I just was like having to be patient and stand back and not direct as much as I'm used to. That was a tough lesson to learn. I don't know if I've fully learned it yet, but
it's got to be tempting to direct for sure, but it seems like it worked this way. Who, besides your dad, who are some of your heroes when it comes to documentary filmmakers? Are there some that you really learned from and love?
I mean, I think just thinking about this film, like Frederick Wiseman, who has made so much. I mean, he doesn't like to use the word observational or direct cinema. I forget exactly what he calls it. He coined a term for his own filmmaking, but he is like the king of making this type of film where he just points his camera and watches what unfolds, and his narratives don't take a traditional narrative arc in his films, and they're so riveting anyway. So he's really influential. My dad certainly is very influential to me. I feel like I've been really inspired by other Toronto filmmakers. I mean, I feel like my films haven't really taken his approach, but I love like experimental Toronto filmmaker Peter Mettler. There's so many. I mean, I recently I went to Berlin this year just to be like a film goer, and I watched an incredible film called Bedrock, which is also an observational film about landscape. Wow. But it's made by a Canadian filmmaker named Kinga Michalska, and it's set in Poland, and it's showing different areas in Poland where many Jews were murdered during the Holocaust, but she simply films people living in those places today and conversations that they have. And I found that film to be incredibly powerful and moving and very confident filmmaking. So I'm definitely going to watch what she makes next.
Wow.
Yeah.
And the first filmmaker you referenced, I'm sorry, just an example.
Frederick Wiseman.
Yeah. What were some of the projects he's be best known for then?
Oh, he's made so much. I mean, his very first film is one of his best known films named Titty Cut Follies. And it's a black and white film. I forget the year it was made, but he's 95 and he's been making films since his late 30s. He was a lawyer before he started making films. And that film is set in an insane asylum. And, he just documents like what happens in this asylum, and it's really intense and really honestly kind of horrific. But his whole career he went on to, and I shouldn't speak in the past tense because he's still making movies actually. He has just documented a lot of different institutions. Like he made one about the New York Public Library. He made one about Central Park that was very influential to this film. He's made so many films about mostly like different institutions and then sometimes cities. Like he made one about Aspen.
Wow. Well, I got to see the New York, that library in New York off of Bryant Park there. That is stunning. The cathedral to library. Yeah. So I must see that. I have to see it. Do you familiar at all with the Maisley brothers who did?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Talk about observational, those guys.
Absolutely.
Started that going. Well, Ali, congratulations. People, go watch Your Tomorrow. It's going to be coming up. Let's make sure I get that timing right. I think it's on March 23rd on TVO. And then you can stream it on starting March 21st on TVO Docs. And watch it on YouTube channel or smart TV apps. A lot of places, if you're familiar with Docs, you can find it there. And I'm so happy for you to get all this exposure for your film. And congrats on it again and whatever you got coming next.
Thank you so much, Phil. I appreciate it a lot. It was nice to talk.
Thank you, Ali. Thanks again to Ali Weinstein and publicist Ingrid Hamilton for setting up this interview. Thanks as always to Phil Hong for producing this episode. A shout out as well to BJ Del Conte, Paul Boudreau, and all the Crispy Critters and piano man Stephen Dudley for the music heard on these episodes. Finally, thanks to you, listener. If you like what you heard, please spread the word. I'm Bill Brio. Thanks for listening.